Today we are back with an update to my most popular video, and I'm going to be teaching you all how to get a full-time design job in esports and gaming. My name is George. I'm currently a graphic and motion designer for 100 Thieves and a freelance designer for 2020's Esports Creative Team of the Year Paper Crowns. 2 years ago, I made this same video, but many of you know esports moves very fast, so we have a lot of new topics to cover today. If you haven't seen the old video, you can check it out, but I'm going to do my best to compare the most important points of that video and see if anything's changed or if they still apply today. With that being said, here is my full guide to getting an esports design job. These are the topics we're going to cover today. We're going to start with the industry and what's changed these past few years, how to utilize social media and make the biggest impact in the community, what works and doesn't work, finding your niche, as well as some tips and tricks with visual examples that big organizations such as 100 Thieves do every single day. Starting off with an overview of the industry, what's changed since 2020. So 2 years ago, I mentioned that the gaming industry was still catching up to the standards and practices of other industries such as traditional sports or tech, but those days are finally coming to a close. Now it's become a standard for organizations to expect designers to build out recognizable visual identities such as the ones that you see on screen. So brands like 100 Thieves, Sentinels, The Guard, FaZe, Subliners, and Loud are competitors in the space in one way or another, and it's important to your job that you help them stand out. The bright side is that with these new standards that are being set, organizations are realizing the impact that designers make on their name, which means that there's more people getting careers for themselves than there ever has been. I think there's still plenty of time to get involved in esports as a complete beginner for at least the next few years. So let's talk about how you can do that for yourself. This is arguably the most important section in the entire video, and that is the importance of social media. I'm going to show you all the best practices to make the biggest impact in the community if you want to start getting recognized by industry leaders. The reason why social media is so valuable in gaming compared to other industries is because it is the sole reason why the community grew the way it did. Twitter is still king for getting in contact with staff members of big organizations, so I'll say it as many times as I need to. If you don't have one, you need to get a Twitter and start engaging with the community. Esports is very tightly knit compared to almost any other industry out there, so if you're not prioritizing your social presence, you're making your career climb a lot harder than it needs to be. I have a full video on how you can build your social media presence in gaming the exact same way that I did, so if social media growth is important to you, please check it out. I showed some examples in my previous video. This still applies today. Organizations have huge followings, and social media is the best way for them to actively engage with their audience. This is where you come into play, because if you can show these organizations that you know how to communicate with their audience visually, you're immediately more desirable compared to someone who just designs without any intention. The simplest way that I always describe it is that you need to communicate, not decorate, and doing this is going to get you hired. So let's move into what works and what doesn't work when it comes to building your own presence on social media and getting recognized by these big organizations. Looking at what doesn't work first, these are common practices that I see all the time which used to work but are less relevant in more recent times, so it's important that you avoid falling for these traps now. The first trap is going to be grinding for a specific organization. So this was really common back in the day when designers were getting paid less and organizations really valued loyalty, but now that these organizations are profitable, they're looking for people that are qualified over anything else. If you can prove that you know how to successfully build out other brands, then you're already showing that you know how to work for pretty much any team out there. It is very rare for an organization to hire someone purely through loyalty nowadays, although it can get you recognized by the staff if they see your work. Just don't expect too much beyond that. The next thing you absolutely want to avoid is posting only your graphic design work with no context and nothing else. This is another super common pitfall that I used to do because I wanted my page to look super professional, but the problem with this is that most of the time the community is going to be more interested with someone's personality over just the result of their work. You can kind of see it as social media being treated less like a portfolio and more like a community where you're sharing and discussing similar topics and work with like-minded people. You do not need to worry about making your page aesthetically pleasing and professional if it means that you're sacrificing your personality in the process. So those are a couple things that you should absolutely avoid, but let's talk about what does work if you want to grow on social media. The first thing is going to be teaching or creating content under a personal brand. This is when you use your personality to shine. It's what I've done and what I've seen others do, especially with TikTok giving a lot of opportunities to new creators. If you feel like you're not experienced enough to teach others, you can easily create content that's going to help you connect with the community. A great example example of this is Homescope, who recently grew a following by doing a daily logo challenge for a year while posting it onto social media. So now in his own way, he's created an impact in the design community and he's gained a lot of valuable connections through it. People enjoy Homescope's content not because the result of his work, but because they get to see the process of another designer and they can relate to the struggles that he faces through the challenge. And this is something that anyone can do regardless of your skill or experience. The next thing you should absolutely do to stand out in this community is take knowledge or inspiration from other industries. This is exactly what I did when I took the design history I learned from university and brought it into gaming. Creatives love learning about design with a fresh perspective, and by taking inspiration from other areas of design, you can introduce a style that helps these organizations stand out. A perfect example of this is the Subliners branding, where they take inspiration from classic Swiss typography seen in New York's subway system. So what they've done is they've translated this design style from the outside world and they've incorporated it into gaming, which is why it's so successful. If you don't know where to start, I'd highly recommend reading books on design history, looking at design styles from other industries or even other parts of the world so that you can soak up as much inspiration as possible. The last thing that you absolutely need to do is showcase process-driven design. I bring this up all the time on my live streams, but this is what we do for our case studies at Paper Crowns. A common theme that I've been speaking on is showing more than just the result of your work, and a standard that's being introduced into the design community is creating a portfolio that shows your thinking alongside the work. So if we look at this Behance project, it's not just a video being showcased on its own. We talk about the client's goal, how we approach the task, why we chose specific design directions, and what this does for you is that it shows employers that you can intentionally strategize for their brand and do more than just create a pretty picture. This is like what I was saying earlier, your goal is to communicate, not decorate. And because this is becoming more of a standard for designers in esports, more and more people are doing it, it's important that you start thinking about it now if you aren't doing it yourself. An employer or organization is always going to be more likely to hire someone that does this over someone that doesn't. So this next topic is a pretty quick one, but I wanted to bring up how and why you'd want to design under a niche in esports, and more importantly, what your options are. Gaming is way too saturated now to be housed under one category because now you have stream graphics, you have supporting businesses, organizations you can work for, and I know people whose entire career is just designing for streamers. The reason why this is important for you to know is that if you niche into stream design, it becomes much easier for you to build a name for yourself with that specific crowd. This is also the same for individual games, so I know that Overwatch has an entire community of designers that only create for Overwatch. When you niche into a community like this, it's much easier to make an impact with those people and grow your name through word of mouth and recommendation. A really big thing that clients and employers are looking for is hiring someone that they can trust. So if you work with a friend of this client, a vouch from them can go a really long way. This is a really great way to climb and network while still making money. And word of mouth doesn't necessarily work for a lot of industries, but I can guarantee you it is incredibly important for this one. If you haven't already, I suggest you look into what's most enjoyable for you at the moment, whether it's stream graphics or competitive esports design, and consider growing your presence just in that field. You can always bounce around and switch niches over time like I did, but it's a great way to start your initial climb without getting overwhelmed. Now lastly, this is my favorite part of the video. We're talking about tips, tricks, and trends in esports graphics. These are things that can help improve your work and stand out from others in the community. I mentioned this in the previous video, but these rules still apply today and they are incredibly important to know. You want to make sure your work is memorable, recognizable, eye-catching, and different. These are all things you should check off when you're designing in esports, and you should imagine yourself as a viewer when you consider these things. So this is kind of the ideal experience you should hope for in the perspective of your viewer. Let's say I'm an esports fan, I'm scrolling through Twitter, I see a graphic, I stop scrolling, I recognize it's in the style of 100 Thieves, and I'm inspired enough by the design to keep the image in my memory. I think a perfect example of this is Team Liquid's first Valorant announcement by Enigma. I remember seeing it on the timeline. It was so iconic, it was fresh, and it set a new standard for how people do Valorant announcements that you still see people copying today. Something like that hits every checkbox, and if you can succeed in doing this, organizations are going to love working with you. Here are some other rapid fire tips that are helpful. So first is reflecting your graphics. This helps freshen up your work so it doesn't feel too repetitive on the timeline. The last thing you want to do is create graphics that feel templated or low effort. Next up is categorizing. So this is when you divide the visuals for an organization into sections. For example, this is the style for League of Legends at 100 Thieves, and this is the style for Valorant. They're similar enough for you to relate to a single brand's image, but by using different layouts, you're able to help help the viewer immediately identify parts of the brand without actually needing to scan any of the information. Just make sure that when you do this that you're not stretching the styles too much to the point where they feel like they're made for two different brands. Next is emotional based design. This is the most important trick, and the best way to describe it is with win graphics. So think about it this way: if a team wins a game, the way the information should be presented needs to stand out so that it brings excitement to the viewer. You can indicate this with a change in color or by creating a completely exclusive layout depending on the importance of the win. You have no idea how many times I've seen designers use the exact same layout for their win and loss graphics. Doing this just shows that you're not considering the team's audience when you're designing, so you definitely want to avoid it. And this last tip is my personal recommendation that you need to capitalize on, and that is motion graphics. Take advantage of this right now. Not a lot of people are practicing animation despite the fact that more and more teams are incorporating it into their marketing. It really doesn't need to be complicated, and I already have a few videos to help you get started. If you have basic animation skills to support your design work, you're already going to stand out from a lot of creatives in esports. So to end off, I wanted to answer a few frequently asked questions I get about esports that I think are important for you to know. If you're looking to transition into esports from another industry, you already have the advantage of having this unique perspective of design, so your number one priority should be building your social presence within the community. If you're debating getting a degree for esports, I can confidently say that the degree itself isn't going to be necessary, but the knowledge you gain from a university can be beneficial to you like it was for me. So you can do some research on your university's design program, make sure that you're actually going to learn from it, and then you can weigh if that knowledge is going to be valuable rather than the piece of paper. Lastly, if you're still learning how to present your work to clients, I have a short 60-second clip that gives you some tips which you can find here. This has been your updated guide to becoming a full-time esports designer. Please comment with any questions that I haven't answered. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.